The air inside Ouvrage Trente-Deux had suddenly lost its flavor of existential certainty. It was now thick with the unmistakable scent of existential dread, mixed with slightly stale ink. Colonel Théodore Croquet stood motionless on the pristine croquet lawn, clutching his silver-tipped mallet like a relic. It was like a relic of a lost logical civilization, as the distant low rumble of hundreds of German tank engines. They were moving with reckless disregard for French logistical forecasts, and vibrated through the manicured turf. It was the sound of terrible velocity, and worse, terrible improvisation. So Lieutenant Fouquet watched the colonel intently. Fouquet, whose misery had metastasized into full-blown panic, said, "Sir, the sound is closer than the technical assessment." It suggested it should be, and the forward posts are unresponsive, as we have reports of motorized units. They are 30 kilometers to our immediate rear. So Croquet slowly lowered his gaze from the horizon of unsporting behavior. He lowered his gaze to the ground, and his monocle, usually fixed with unflappable precision, slipped slightly. Rear Croquet whispered, testing the acoustics of the word, as the rear is where we store the excess seasonal uniform inventory. It is not an operational zone. It is purely administrative. So he straightened his tunic, recovering his poise. He recovered with the mechanical precision of a self-winding watch, saying, "Fouquet, they have circumvented the line. This is a profound failure of geography, not of engineering. And the Germans have exhibited a level of administrative sloppiness that is frankly unconscionable, as they have chosen a path that will necessitate countless unforeseen expenditures. This will cause expenditures in track maintenance and unauthorized fuel consumption, so their quartermasters will weep." He dropped the mallet, and it made a surprisingly small clack on the grass. But Colonel Fouquet pressed, desperation making him brave. He said, "They are behind us, and the entire Ninth Army is exposed. We must prepare the defenses, and we must aim the guns, even if they are pointing the wrong way." Croquet turned his gaze, now focusing not on the distant threat, but on the nearer, more tangible danger. He saw the potential headline: Maginot Line operational, but administratively insolvent. Defenses, Lieutenant. Against what? A military review panel. No, Fouquet. We have lost the battle of geometry. But we shall not lose the war of documentation. So we must stabilize the true front line, the paperwork. Croquet strode toward the nearest surface entrance, his polished boots clicking a furious rhythm on the cobblestones. He issued a new definitive order, shouted down the main ventilation shaft. "I hereby declare l'état d'urgence administrative. All personnel are to report to the records bunker, subsection C, 14, as the highest priority is no longer defense, but solvency. We must ensure that when the dust settles, France can file for a full reimbursement from the League of Nations." Inside the depths of the bunker, the atmosphere had transformed from a luxury cruise into a highly aggressive tax audit. The main records bunker, a subterranean chamber protected by 6 feet of reinforced concrete, was now the command center. 3 redundant humidity control units were gone, and map tables were replaced by stacks of beige folders reaching the ceiling. Colonel Croquet, now clad in a pair of reading spectacles, perched precariously on a supply crate. The crate was labeled, "Reserved for 1947 brandy," and he addressed his hastily assembled staff. This included the head of communications, the chief baker, and the entire logistics corps, all crammed shoulder to shoulder. They were with hundreds of archival boxes, and, "Gentlemen, the Wehrmacht has committed an unforgivable breach of etiquette. They are at this very moment rendering our entire operational existence irrelevant." But relevance is temporal. Relevance is temporal, and forms are eternal. So Croquet tapped a sheaf of papers nervously. "Our immediate crisis is not the Panzerdivision, but the Auditor General who serves France long after the tank has rusted. When that man arrives, I need to present him with a fortress that is financially pristine. He held up a small, alarming pink slip. And we have located the General Supply Manifest for the second quarter, 1939. Everything seems to be in order, except for one crucial line item, which is item 47B, emergency butter rations. 100 kilos, so a collective gasp went through the room, as butter was not a mere military expenditure. It was a socio-economic commitment. So Sergeant Philippe Croquet addressed the nervous logistics clerk. Where is the authorizing document for the disbursement of this butter on Form B-47? Specifically, where is the signature of Captain Dubois? Asked the sergeant, who had spent the hour calculating the trajectory. He used his outdated census data and stammered. Sir Captain Dubois transferred to colonial services in Morocco in August 1939. We filed the form, but I believe the signature was pending final review of the emergency classification. Croquet's face went white, so he removed his spectacles, polishing them slowly. Pending sergeant, the butter was requisitioned. It was dispersed, and the bread we eat right now, the brioche we enjoy with our morning coffee, exists partially on that ledger. If the butter was consumed without proper authorization, we have not just lost a signature. We have committed fraudulent gastronomy. So Fouquet stepped forward, rubbing his temples. The distant rattle of machine gun fire sounded peaceful compared to the intensity of the colonel's focus on the butter. Colonel, with the greatest respect, are we certain that this is the best use of our final operational hours? The enemy is mobilizing heavy artillery, so perhaps we should be locating the firing mechanism safety keys. Nonsense, Lieutenant. The Germans are operating outside their designated war zone, while we are inside ours. They are fighting the 1940 war. We are preparing for the 1946 audit. Which do you think is harder to win? Croquet slapped his hand on the requisition slip. We must track this butter without Dubois' signature. This entire expense is non-recoverable, so I refuse to have Ouvrage Trente-Deux labeled as a budgetary black hole. Suddenly, the door to the records bunker was flung open, revealing Maître Boulanger Jean-Pierre. He was the fortress's highly temperamental head baker, immaculate in his white apron, but his face was set in outrage. Colonel Croquet the baker roared, ignoring the stacks of papers and the terrified officers. I apologize for the interruption of your military maneuvers, but I must know. Have you located the B-47 form? Croquet blinked. We are in the process, Jean-Pierre. Your timing is excellent. Excellent. It is crucial. The internal accounting cannot be finalized. I need that signature to reconcile my flour usage against the fat disbursement. Furthermore, Jean-Pierre lowered his voice to a hiss. My report shows that the 100 kilos of emergency butter were used. They were used to develop the defensive sourdough, the loaf we were going to utilize for morale during the long siege. The defensive sourdough, Croquet murmured reverently. A masterpiece of tensile strength and yeasty defiance. We cannot allow its legacy to be tainted by incomplete paperwork. So Jean-Pierre pointed a flour-dusted finger. If I cannot prove that the butter was officially emergency, I will have to classify the resulting brioche as non-essential. It is a luxury item which requires an entirely separate, non-standardized form B-47A. And I haven't got the stamps for B-47A. The bureaucratic crisis had reached critical mass, as the French army was not merely being bypassed, it was fighting itself over the legal status of baked goods, while the actual war rolled past its rear entrance. For the next 2 hours, the only sound in the heart of Ouvrage Trente-Deux was the frantic rustling of paper. It was punctuated by the faint, rhythmic percussion of German heavy machine guns outside. Croquet presided over the chaos, shouting specific instructions about filing codes and cross-referencing ledger entries. Focus, gentlemen. If we lose the integrity of the paperwork, we lose everything. If the butter is unsanctioned, what about the wine, the cheese, the strategic allocation of the porcelain coffee cups? Fouquet, drenched in sweat from pulling heavy archive boxes, finally snapped, "Colonel, nobody will care about the coffee cups." "On the contrary," Lieutenant Croquet said, his eyes glittering with fanaticism. "If the Germans take Paris, the administrative burden will be unimaginable. We must ensure that Trente-Deux remains an island of perfect accountability." Suddenly, Private Renard, the young signal officer who had delivered the initial disastrous news, stumbled back into the bunker. He looked paler than ever, his hands shaking even worse than before. "Colonel, new priority flash from a listening post. Confirmed large-scale German movement. They have reached the Meuse River, and they are using tanks with full radio communication." Croquet waved a dismissive hand, not looking up from a ledger. "Yes, yes. Uncivilized communication. Did they mention if they had submitted their movement orders to the correct regional authority?" "Sir, no. But the reports indicate they have established forward observation posts directly above our main supply road." "We are cut off, Colonel." Completely, Croquet froze. His pen hovered over a zero in the column marked "Forecasted Wine Reserves." "Cut off," he repeated slowly. "The external supply lines are severed." "Yes, sir. Absolutely." Croquet slowly rose, radiating an intensity that transcended mere military panic. "This is worse than I thought," he declared, pushing aside worry about the Germans. "If we are cut off, then we are officially operating as an independent unit. That means we must switch from Form 12A, Standard Garrison Requisition, to Form 18F, Isolated Fortress Operations. And Form 18F requires a completely separate pre-approval certificate for all emergency comfort items, including the butter." Fouquet watched in horror as his commander, facing total military isolation, chose to escalate the paperwork. "Sergeant Philippe, forget Dubois. Find the pre-approval for Form 18F, filed under Interdepartmental Contingency Measures." Philippe, scrambling beneath a desk, blindly grabbed a dusty red file. "Wait, Colonel, I found a form. It is a high-priority one. It is not B-47. It is C-68. Croquet squinted. C-68? The inventory of emergency comfort wine? Yes, sir. The label indicates it was used to provision the deep cellar during the period of high alarm simulation, January 1938. Philippe carefully pulled out the ledger sheet. "And sir, the consumption column is nearly blank." "It states that over 80% of the reserve stock was consumed, but Captain Dubois only signed for 5%. A dreadful silence fell. The butter was a minor crime. The wine was a felony, with 80% consumed. It was without proper administrative cover. So Croquet stared at the form, his perfect universe crumbling into a pit of Merlot. "Impossible," Croquet whispered, clutching the form like a death warrant. "This is treason. This is financial anarchy. We can handle the Wehrmacht, but we cannot handle a discrepancy of this magnitude, Lieutenant Fouquet, sir. New orders. We must locate the original manifest for the cellar insulation project. If we can prove the corks were improperly stored, we can declare the remaining wine spoiled and thus justify the emergency consumption through natural attrition. Find the 1936 architect schematics immediately. We must prove the cellar was defective before the Germans arrive." As the sound of distant explosions intensified, Lieutenant Fouquet looked at the mountains of paper and the furious baker. The colonel was now weeping softly over the unauthorized consumption of a 1934 Bordeaux. He knew the war was over, but the audit had just begun. So next time, in Ouvrage Trente-Deux, quest for the insulation schematics. It leads Colonel Croquet to an obscure sub-basement, where he discovers the true dark secret of the Maginot Line. The entire structural integrity is dependent on a single load-bearing memo that might have been accidentally shredded in 1935.